Thanks for joining us. So it just gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Amy Moredock, CFM. She is Queen Anne's County's planning director, and she's joining us this evening to talk generally about the county's draft comprehensive plan to provide us with an update. Following Amy's presentation, there will be a short period of time for questions and answers. So think about what you'd like to ask Amy. So Amy has been a professional planner with nearly 20 years of land use experience on Maryland's Eastern Shore. She has been directly involved in both local and state planning efforts in Maryland, with a long history of not only drafting and implementing a wide variety of land use ordinances, but also of reviewing projects and permits. Her areas of focus include environmental regulation, floodplain management, resiliency, and hazard planning, and water resource planning. She is a member of the American and Maryland chapters of Certified Floodplain and Stormwater Managers, having served as the Eastern Shore Regional Representative from 2013 to 2020. Ms. Moredock has been the MA County Representative on the Governor's Intergovernmental Committee on Agriculture since 2014. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Amy Moredock, and you're welcome to share your screen. And we're really looking forward to your presentation tonight. Thanks again for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I think first I would just like to touch upon some of the key issues that have been brought to my attention that you'd like to have some additional information about. I've been working with Jim and Crystal in terms of what you were looking for in terms of where you might be engaged in this final leg of our comprehensive plan update. So I just thought I'd share with you some of the resources that are available to you. I know a lot of you have been engaged in the comprehensive planning update process all along. I recognize a lot of your names, and I'm glad to see you here tonight. We are now, as a matter of fact, we are literally in a transition, getting our final draft comprehensive plan to the county commissioners. And on Tuesday, the 25th, which is next Tuesday, that final draft document of the county's comprehensive plan update and the Kent Narrows community plan update are being conveyed to the county commissioners with a request from our planning commission members who have been meeting about these two drafts since 2019. They've favorably reviewed all of the comments that have been received and are asking the county commissioners to hold a public hearing. So we anticipate that that public hearing will be scheduled for the 22nd of March. So if any of you have missed an opportunity to review documents or to comment in a public forum, you will have that opportunity, and you'll have plenty of time to review the plan, both plans, if you're interested in the county's overall comprehensive plan, which is applicable to all of the unincorporated areas. A lot of you may already realize this, but just to emphasize, the county does not have jurisdiction within incorporated towns. So all of the incorporated towns in the county have their own land use ordinances, they have their own comprehensive plans. And we've also been working closely with them to make sure that we are coordinating our efforts and that the county's overarching vision is consistent with all of the municipalities and their visions and their plans for growth. Also, if you're interested in the Kent Narrows community plan, that draft will also be available beginning on the 25th. You'll get a sneak preview because the county commissioners, when they release their packets to the public, those are released usually on the Monday afternoon or evening. So officially, those documents should be available for your review on Monday. the Kent Narrows Development Foundation had requested that their plan remain a standalone document. And during this update to the comprehensive plan, what the county decided to do and discussed it in multiple visioning sessions early on is we wanted to reabsorb all of the community plans back into the comprehensive plan. And we wanted to do so for several reasons. And one of those reasons is specific to the sewage capacity issues that the county has come up against during this planning cycle. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Another reason that we wanted to reabsorb those community plans is that a lot of work went into those plans, which were enacted and reformalized in the 2020 plan. And there are a lot of great individual design standards that are specific to each community. However, there are so many zoning districts that were born out of that individual planning exercise that a lot of people are frustrated with the number of zoning districts, the number of regulations, and just the complexity of applying for building permits and trying to understand what all the rules are in all of these individual zoning districts. In some cases, due to the community plans, there are some zoning districts that are applicable to 1 or 5 properties. And that's a lot of work for people to try to understand and for our permitting division to try to keep straight. So we wanted to really streamline the process because we understand that a lot of people get frustrated with the whole permitting and plan review side. Once all these plans get adopted and they get enacted, sometimes they're a little more complicated to implement than you would hope. So through this exercise, we have reabsorbed the Chester-Stevensville Community Plan into the county's overarching plan and the Graysonville Community Plan back into the county plan. The Kent Narrows has remained a standalone document because the Kent Narrows Foundation has its own special taxing district and their own development foundation that oversees that special taxing district. And they oversee one zoning district, which is the Waterfront Village Commercial District. So we understood that because of the uniqueness of this area, that we left that plan as a standalone, and then we proceeded with the overarching community plan, county plan. I was asked to touch upon the key issues that are impacting this planning cycle, and I already touched upon the one. Queen Anne's County is leading the way in a way that I don't think it intended to or has enjoyed very much, because we had some growing pains with realizing how to deal with the fact that our growth area, which is predominantly Kent Island and Kent Narrows, which encompasses all the communities I've just been talking about, is served by the Kent Island sewage treatment plant. You probably recall that I think it must have been 2006 and 2008, all the counties in Maryland were asked to develop watershed implementation plans. These watershed implementation plans were mandated through the Environmental Protection Agency. So it was a federal mandate for all of the states, including Maryland, located in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, to address the pollutant load rates that are going into the Chesapeake Bay. So Maryland received a nutrient cap, and that nutrient cap was shared with every county in the state of Maryland. And Queen Anne's County received a nutrient cap for each wastewater treatment plant located in the county. So some of the municipalities, they have nutrient caps, and Queen Anne's County, with its one facility to serve its growth area, also received a nutrient cap. Well, we've hit the cap with the amount of pollutants that can be discharged into the Chesapeake Bay. And what that means is we don't have sewage capacity to offer to any new developments that aren't already allocated through previous approvals. So requests to expand our growth areas or to intensify development can't be honored currently, but we had to deal with how in a long-range planning capacity the community is going to deal with that restriction. And what we have developed through this exercise, through this very public comprehensive planning exercise, was a short-term and long-term option. And a short-term option looks at re-rating the county's plant, wastewater treatment plant, and then long-term options to look at nutrient trading possibilities, to look at spray irrigation possibilities. There are a lot of different options under the Maryland Department of the Environment, who sets these caps for all of the wastewater treatment plants. There are a lot of options, and a lot of them are costly. A lot of them may not be practical, but the Department of the Environment is talking to Queen Anne's County in a way that it's never had a conversation like this with any other jurisdiction, because we're the first to hit this limit. So we know that we have focused a lot of resources and infrastructure on the island and the Narrows, and that we need to find means to support that development and support the infrastructure that is here. But we also, as we're looking at the nutrient cap and understanding that limitation, we're also looking at one of the most vulnerable areas of the community too. So the plan has had to deal with sea level rise implications and other climate change implications. And this is probably where I'd like to start a screen share to just illustrate that point. Okay, now I need to toggle between, there we go. Okay, I need to move that. Okay. What you're seeing now, can you is the sea level rise coastal vulnerability viewer. And this tool is on the county's website and available to all. And this tool illustrates our most vulnerable land masses in the community, which are subject to sea level rise projections. And you'll see here in the legend that we have a 2050 sea level rise projection at a 2-foot sea level rise impact. We have a 2100 projection at a 4-foot impact. And then we have a third scenario that looks at 2050 sea level rise projection at 2 feet with a storm surge. And this takes a while, so I don't want to zoom in too quickly, but you will see the vulnerability in our communities that are designated growth areas. So this is something that we really had to reconcile and deal with in this plan update. And as we're looking at limited sewage capacity, we're also looking at making sure that we're planning in such a way that this data and this information is being considered during all project review. Here is that sea level rise study that was conducted in 2016. And that mapping tool was generated as a result of this vulnerability assessment. This assessment is directly connected with our sewage treatment plant because this assessment was completed in order to validate the need to hook up the Southern Kent Island failing septic systems, which is also a priority in the comp plan update to make sure that before we look at new development, we are also picking up other vulnerable communities within this area subject to sea level rise and also subject to failing systems. So this study and this plan has really guided a lot of decisions, a lot of capital improvements that the county has focused upon, as well as a lot of long-range planning efforts. There's another study that a lot of people don't talk about, but is equally important. And as I toggle to my next screen, this is the county's hazard mitigation plan. This plan is also gets serious weight in consideration with long-range planning efforts. As you see, the cover of this plan includes an inundated Annie's Restaurant, which is an iconic restaurant on the island, but also a very vulnerable resource. This plan looks at all of our natural hazards from flood hazards to winter storms to sea level rise, heat index, which is becoming an ever increasing stressor on our environment and our lives. It also includes a new requirement by the state to address nuisance flooding, which is the flooding that we see more increasingly, which is what we call sunny day flooding or a high moon tide flooding. This is flooding in areas that we haven't historically seen flood patterns, but we're now seeing them because we're seeing stormwater requirements and stormwater impacts in areas that are converging with higher than normal tides as a result of climate stressors. So all of these plans have been considered and are key elements to some of the key issues that we're grappling with. I'm also going to take you to the county's comprehensive plan update website, where you will find the current draft. This draft will be updated on Monday with the new revised final draft. And I'm going to take you to the public review draft. Some of you are probably familiar with this site, but all of the draft elements are here. There were really only minor updates that the planning commissioners made at their last meeting where they held a public hearing on this draft. That was on the 13th of January. Basically, what you see on this page is the draft that is being conveyed with a few edits. But I would wait, if I were you, if you haven't cracked open these drafts, I would wait until Monday and you will see the final draft. So they're both here. Also, just to make sure that you don't miss any meetings, or if you want to go back and look at previous meetings, all of that information is here. We are also making that information available on the county's website. This is the planning and zoning site. So we're making information available here. And here is the website where the commissioners post their agendas. And their agenda isn't posted yet, as I mentioned, but the agenda for the 25th will be posted here. And there will be links to the draft plans there as well. So I'm going to stop my screen share. And I think I hit all the hot button issues that Jim asked me to do when he reached out to me. But I think I should stop talking now and let you ask me some questions.
Yes, just unmute yourself if you have a question, Carolyn. Did you have a question, Carolyn Armstrong?
Okay.
There you go. Oh, you were unmuted. Now you're muted again. You just need to unmute yourself, Carolyn.
I am.
Oh, there you go. We've got you now. What happened? You were unmuted and then you were muted. So try one more time.
Under the.
There you go. I'm sorry. There you go. Now you're unmuted again.
I'm unmuted.
Yes. What is your
Or-
question?
My question is, are you sure you're keeping up to date with some of the climate change data that is not overwhelmingly good? It seems like some of the talk about are on dates that are not quite up to 2022. The change in the Arctic has been enormous, and it's going far faster in Greenland and the Antarctic and the Arctic than anyone thought. So I'm wondering if you have, where are you? I'm wondering if you have plans for ocean. Like I noticed that Kent Narrows is extremely overbuilt, I think. And of course they have the new hotel, which means sewage and all that kind of thing. But I think your neighborhoods there might be more drastically impacted than you planned for.
That's the question.
Yeah, and that's a good question, and I'm glad that you brought that up. So some of the resources I shared with you are older planning documents, and we have definitely in the last year we have been involved in a resiliency planning and financing review, where we do have an updated plan where we have taken a lot of the strategies and priorities that were identified in the earlier resiliency plan, vulnerability assessment. We have updated those in accordance with the latest information. And we're also, there's a two-pronged project that we have called out in the comp plan to prioritize to complete. And the first prong was to look at the latest data and to prioritize those vulnerable areas in terms of how best we could pay for them and which resources we cannot afford not to pay attention to. So the second phase is a financing phase of that study. And so we have committed in this update of the comp plan to complete that analysis. But we were able to incorporate some of the findings from the international climate study that was actually released while we were drafting. So we were able to include some of those findings in the drafting, most especially some of the findings that are relative to the significance of preserving our prime agricultural farmland, because so much of the sea level rise encroachment that is happening more quickly than we had previously projected is inundating farm fields, causing saltwater intrusion in areas, in lower lying areas. So we were able to include some of those strategies to ensure that we're looking at our upland areas and making sure that some of our ag preservation efforts are really concentrating on preserving that farmland, because as we are all competing in an international market and a national market, making sure that the Eastern Shores farmland is still viable and protected becomes even more important. But to your questions about our areas of growth and development, you're exactly right. We have to ensure that while we're protecting our economic viability, we're also measuring that against Maryland Department of the Environment requirements, the National Flood Insurance Program requirements. We are now an MS4 county, which means that we have enough impervious coverage in that area, which is, for right now, our impervious coverage in the Kent Island portion of that growth area exceeds the, it doesn't exceed, but it has hit an urban threshold. So we now have to come up with a impervious surface treatment plan for that area. So there are a lot of boxes, environmental regulatory boxes that have to be ticked that are brought forward in this plan update.
Thank you.
What's the meeting number?
Oh, and also all the resources I just shared with you, I dropped into the link. So you can grab those there for future reference.
The passcode is 90.
Yep.
Oh,
I have a question.
Sandy,
Yeah. Yeah, this is Sandy Collins. I was wondering,
No.
along with what you've been talking about with that, the plans on, sea levels and so forth, do you work in conjunction with or use as a resource the shore and river keepers?
Yes.
Because they're
yeah.
fantastic.
We do. We
Yeah.
work with the Shore Rivers Association as well as Eastern Shore Land Conservancy. Eastern Shore Land Conservancy has pulled a lot of partners together, including representatives of shore rivers and planning departments all over the shore to form what's called SCAP, which is the Eastern Shore Climate Adaptation Partnership. So we are in dialogue with one another.
That's great.
That group is on a hiatus because there's the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy is in a transition. They had hired a coastal resiliency planner several years ago who started to work with local governments to draft vulnerability studies. And I was lucky enough to be a part of the very first draft that they created. And that was really exciting. And I hope to continue that work with them because they have done a lot of good work pulling nonprofits and government entities together to make sure we're all working toward the same end. But they've also been real cutting edge in moving forward with vulnerability studies. They've also done an extreme participation study, which is really valuable to local governments as we're looking at nuisance flood challenges. So yes, and more than ever, when I first started watershed planning, local governments had to manage watershed planning implementation grants. But the evolution of that grant program has really put those grants in the hands of organizations like Shore Rivers. So they, in a lot of ways, they've become the implementers of best management practices. So with Corsica River Conservancy and Shore Rivers and Queen Anne's Conservation and Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, yeah, those partnerships are vital to making sure that the planning gets done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Jim?
Yeah, I do. Amy, thank you so much for giving this presentation. You've covered a lot in a few minutes. Thank you. We had talked, you and I had talked about the impact of transportation and transportation issues, both to the environment and health and safety and those kinds of things. One of the chapters of the comprehensive plan does deal with transportation. And could you share with us a couple things that impressed you from that chapter?
You're right. Yeah, and I get carried away with the resiliency planning, so I'm glad you reminded me. So the county right now we don't have any real role in this study, but we're engaged in monitoring the NEPA study, which is a part of the Chesapeake Bay Crossing Study. So MDOT is undertaking this study to look at the next plausible step in the Chesapeake Bay Crossing, whether it's going to be a third span or something else. I think we all know it's going to be a third span. And our county commissioners have been very, very proactive in requesting that this study not stall, that it continually move forward, because while we're conducting the study of the crossing, obviously the impacts to Queen Anne's County are felt much more acutely than they are in other regions. So where we are with that impact study right now is that the preferred corridors have been identified for a third span. And Queen Anne's County is one of those areas that has been selected. The next phase of that study is to look very specifically at environmental impacts, to projected locations of that third span, what that right-of-way encroachment is going to look like, what that looks like for private property owners, what that looks like for the resources that would be impacted. And so in the screen share that I started with, obviously that's a complicated study for our community. In terms of the transportation impacts, there are a lot of strategies that are longstanding and that have been further buttressed by actions of our county commissioners and their annual transportation priorities letter that we submit to the Department of Transportation and State Highway, that ask that we find a way to preserve and kind of save our local access points for our community and keep bridge traffic off of our side roads, off of our secondary roads, because the congestion that is caused by that diversion, first of all, it doesn't get bridge travelers any farther along. There's a great misunderstanding that is promoted by apps that you can upload to your phone that serve no purpose. And we've tried to be a real voice for awareness of that issue. But our Department of Public Works has drafted a transportation plan for the island and the Narrows that we continually try to convince State Highway and MDOT to honor. They have not adopted it in any official capacity as yet, but it is a key issue. And other key issues have resulted from this update, and they include, obvious infrastructure upgrades, but upgrades to obviously pedestrian motion within the Narrows and the island, minor upgrades that you wouldn't think about, but it all is kind of cumulative, like replacing guardrails, repainting, updated signage. It all kind of feeds together into an exacerbated bad situation in terms of transportation on the island and the Narrows.
Thank you. We have one more time for one more question. Does anyone have a final question? Tom, Tate, if you'll unmute yourself.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate your presentation this evening. You showed a map at one time I wanted to see longer on sea level rise as it affected Kent Island, and I saw 3 levels of threats and time frames and so on. And I was wondering if you might have a moment that you could at least go back to that map and tell us how to look at that with an eagle eye.
Sure. So I included the link in the chat box, and I will take you, let me share my screen. Okay. So once you click into the link, and this, let me see if this is, let's see, it should be, let me take it to
That's the
State
one.
Street that I can see right there. So yeah, it should take you to parcel specific areas. So you should be able to put in your own address and get down to that level of detail.
Okay.
So I just typed in, actually it didn't take me to State Street. So that's strange. But if you type in your address or an address that you're looking for, it should get you to parcel specific review. And I'm going to get out of there. Well, that took me all the way up to Church Hill, but which is good because it shows you that the inundation levels are mapped throughout the county. I mean, we think of the island and the Narrows, but really there are impacts county-wide anywhere that we're adjacent to a tributary of the bay. But I showed you a picture on the hazard plan of Annie's, so I can maybe come in even closer to show you what that looks like. Feel like I'm going the wrong way here. So there's the new Botel. And there's the Jamal property. But yeah, it doesn't give you any information other than where the parcel falls under this projection layer, which is important in terms of citing for floodplain regulations. It's important in terms of how a stormwater management plan might be engineered.
Those yellow lines sort of denote the current coastline, correct?
Yes. So yes, you have your property lines outlined, so you can click into individual properties. I don't want to call anyone out, but this is a Chesapeake Wildlife and Heritage property. So yeah, you can click in and get specific information on the property.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a really great resource. All of my colleagues, especially in Anne Arundel County, they're very jealous of this resource that we have.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your going a little deeper there for us. Thanks. Very exciting.
There are other great resources too through FEMA and Maryland Department of the Environment, where you can also look up a lot of floodplain data as well. And I'd be happy to share that with you too.
And we'll make these links available on our Facebook page as well, along with
Great.
the link to this recording. So everybody can come back and take another look and feel free to share. Great questions. Amy, thank you for such an informative presentation on a topic that I know is very important to all of us. So really appreciate that.
Sure. And I did want to point out that Stephanie Jones has been working very hard. She's been our project manager in our planning department, working with our consultants who are Wallace Montgomery. But Stephanie Jones is our long-range principal planner, and I've included her contact information in the chat room as well. So if you have questions about upcoming meetings or the draft document or anything related to this process or more information that you'd like to have, don't hesitate to contact either one of us.
Thank you very much.